The hemp rope cuts into his ankles so deeply that he can feel the fibers scraping against bone. Heinrich of Freiburg is 31 years old, and he hangs upside down from a wooden scaffold in the market square of Strasbourg, can feel the blood rushing to his head with each heartbeat until his vision pulses red with every pump of his heart, can smell the sawdust being scattered beneath him by an executioner's assistant who works with the casual efficiency of a craftsman preparing his workspace, can hear the crowd gathering hundreds of voices, perhaps thousands, the entire city coming to witness what the magistrates have promised will be the most spectacular execution in living memory. He was, until 17 days ago, a master blacksmith whose forge produced the finest blades in the Upper Rhine Valley, a guild member in good standing, a husband to a woman named Margaret, who is somewhere in this crowd, a father to 3 children who have been forbidden from attending, but who will hear about what happens here for the rest of their lives. He owned a house near the cathedral. He employed 2 journeymen and an apprentice. He paid his taxes, attended Mass, contributed to the city's defense when the walls needed repair. Now he hangs inverted between 2 wooden posts, his arms bound behind his back with leather straps that bite into his wrists, his legs spread apart and tied separately to the crossbeam above him, his body positioned precisely according to specifications that the executioner has followed many times before. The saw rests on a wooden stand beside him. He cannot turn his head far enough to see it clearly, but he glimpsed it when they were positioning him a 2-man timber saw with teeth the length of his thumb, designed for cutting oak beams, freshly sharpened this morning by a man who will use it to cut through Heinrich's body while Heinrich watches and feels every stroke. They will begin at the groin and work downward, which is to say upward, since he is inverted. They will saw through him slowly, methodically, prolonging the process as long as possible. The position is deliberate. Hanging upside down forces blood to the brain, keeping the condemned conscious far longer than any other method would allow. Men have survived for hours during this procedure. Some have remained aware until the saw reached their navel. A few, and the executioner mentioned this, with something like professional pride, have stayed conscious until the blade touched their sternum. Heinrich does not know how long he will last. He does not know if he will be able to maintain his dignity, to die without screaming, to give his family at least the memory of courage. He does not know if God will grant him the mercy of unconsciousness, or if he will be aware of every moment as his body is divided into 2 pieces, and his organs spill onto the sawdust below. What he knows is that in approximately 15 minutes, 2 men will grip the handles of that saw and begin cutting him in half from the bottom up. What he knows is that his crime, the crime for which this punishment has been decreed, was refusing to forge weapons for an army he believed was marching toward unjust war. What he knows is that the magistrate who sentenced him is standing in the front row of the crowd, wearing ceremonial robes, waiting to watch Heinrich die for the crime of conscience. The executioner approaches. His name is Master Conrad, and he has performed this particular execution 11 times in his 30-year career. He is not cruel, he is professional. He views his work the way Heinrich once viewed his own, as a craft requiring skill, precision, and a certain detachment from the human implications of what he produces. "It is time," Master Conrad says. "Do you wish to make a final statement?" Heinrich's voice comes out strange, distorted by his inverted position, by the pressure of blood in his skull, by the fear he cannot entirely suppress. "I forgive those who condemned me. I ask forgiveness from those I have wronged. I commend my soul to God's mercy." The words are traditional, expected. They reveal nothing of what Heinrich actually feels, which is terror so profound that he can barely form coherent thoughts, but the ritual matters. The performance matters. His family will be told what he said, and he wants them to remember a man who faced death with the dignity befitting his station. Master Conrad nods. He gestures to his assistant, a younger man who takes position at one end of the saw. Master Conrad positions himself at the other end. "May God receive your soul," the executioner says. He grips the wooden handle. The saw teeth touch Heinrich's flesh, and what follows will take nearly 2 hours. What you are about to learn has been deliberately obscured from popular history for 500 years. We know about medieval executions. We have seen the Hollywood version's quick beheadings, dramatic hangings, perhaps the occasional burning at the stake. We have a sanitized understanding of how medieval justice operated, filtered through entertainment, that makes ancient cruelty seem almost romantic. But we do not know about the sawing. The sawing was considered the most extreme punishment available to medieval European courts. It was reserved for crimes so severe that ordinary execution was deemed insufficient treason, heresy, regicide, and offenses against the social order so fundamental that the condemned person's suffering needed to be maximized as a warning to others. It was performed publicly, always, because the entire purpose was spectacle. It was designed not merely to kill, but to horrify, to demonstrate the absolute power of authority over the bodies of those who defied it. Tonight, you will learn exactly what this punishment involved. You will learn about the physiology that made it so prolonged, why hanging upside down extended consciousness, why the saw's progression was calibrated to maximize duration, why victims could survive for hours while being cut in half. You will learn about the legal framework that authorized such punishments, how courts justified them, how executioners were trained to perform them, how communities gathered to watch them. You will learn about Heinrich of Freiburg, who was 31 years old when he was sentenced to death by sawing for refusing to forge weapons for a military campaign he believed was unjust. You will learn about the 17 days between his sentencing and his execution, about what he experienced in the dungeon beneath Strasbourg's courthouse, about the men who would ultimately carry out his sentence. Subscribe if you want to understand this forgotten history. Comment below, telling me where you are watching from. Because Heinrich is hanging upside down in Strasbourg's market square, and the saw has just touched his body, and I am going to tell you exactly what happened during the next 2 hours, what the witnesses recorded, what the medical realities were, what it meant to die in a way that shocked even medieval observers accustomed to public violence. But first I need to warn you, this is not entertainment violence. This is not sanitized history. This is what actually happened to real human beings under legal systems that our civilization inherited and built upon. The punishment I am about to describe was considered lawful. It was performed by officers of the court. It was witnessed by ordinary citizens who brought their families to watch. Understanding this history requires confronting what human beings are capable of doing to each other when authority is absolute and cruelty is institutionalized. I am going to tell you the truth. Let us begin. The sawing punishment, known in German as Zersagen, in French as le supplice de la scie, and in Latin as dissectio per ceram, has origins that trace back to antiquity, but it reached its fullest development in medieval Europe between the 12th and 17th centuries. The method was not improvised, it was systematized. Execution manuals from the period describe the procedure in clinical detail, specifying the type of saw to be used, a 2-man timber saw with coarse teeth, the positioning of the condemned, inverted, legs spread, secured at ankles and occasionally at thighs, the starting point, the groin, proceeding toward the head, and the expected duration, between 1 and 4 hours, depending on the condemned's physical constitution and the executioner's skill. The physics of the punishment were understood and deliberately exploited. When a human body is inverted, gravity forces blood toward the head. The heart continues pumping, But now it is pumping downward rather than upward, which means blood accumulates in the brain rather than draining from it. This keeps the condemned conscious far longer than would otherwise be possible during traumatic injury. A person being sawed while hanging right side up would lose consciousness within minutes as blood drained from their brain. A person being sawed while inverted might remain aware for hours. Medical historians who have analyzed the procedure estimate that consciousness could be maintained until the saw reached approximately the navel, the point at which blood loss became catastrophic enough to overcome the effects of inversion. This meant the condemned would be aware as the saw cut through their groin, their lower abdomen, their intestines, their stomach. They would feel the blade's progress. They would see their own organs falling onto the sawdust below. Modern trauma surgeons who have reviewed the historical accounts confirm that the physiological descriptions are accurate. The inverted position does extend consciousness during massive trauma. The progression of the saw would indeed allow prolonged awareness. The descriptions of victims speaking, screaming, praying, and cursing as the blade worked through their bodies are medically plausible. This was not accidental. The executioners knew exactly what they were doing. They had refined the technique over generations, learning through experience which positions maximized suffering, which saw strokes prolonged duration, which approaches kept the condemned alive and aware as long as possible. The punishment existed because the suffering was the point. Let me tell you now about the legal system that authorized such punishments. Medieval European justice operated on principles fundamentally different from modern legal philosophy. The purpose of punishment was not rehabilitation. The concept barely existed. The purpose was not even primarily